Hello, Grats and Gets. Welcome back. Today we are running through every single Xenos army. There's a lot of people who are trying to figure out what is the next army they really want to pivot to, what is the first army they want to start. So what I'm doing is I'm running through every single Xenos faction. I'm going to tell you exactly how they play on the tabletop, and I'm going to tell you what they're generally about. This is going to be a direct follow-up to the every Imperial army. So like and subscribe, share with your friends. Here we go, everybody. Starting with the Aeldari, guys. First thing that you need to know about the Aeldari is that they have pointy ears, and they're totally not space elves. They're Aeldari. Obviously, they're the immortal people with pointy ears, and they're lithe and majestic. Definitely not space elves. Anyway, the way these guys operate on the table are they have speed, and they have very targeted precision hits. So I don't mean precision as in the rule, but as in the spirit of what it is. So they're going to focus down what they need to kill. They have a mechanism called the Fate Dice, which is very similar to the Sisters of Battle's Miracle Dice, which we have discussed in our previous video on the Imperium armies. So the Fate Dice themselves, you get to roll a batch of dice at the beginning of the game, and whatever the face value of those dice are, whether they're 6s, 5s, 3s, 2s, 1s, whatever's, then you get to store those dice and just get to use them to supplement whatever roll you want later on in the game. So if you have 4 6s, then over the course of the game, you could just take, all right, I want to automatically pass this armor save, or automatically, I want to automatically make this damage 8 damage in case it's like a melter or something like that. So it's very, very useful. Great for advances, great for lots of other things. They also have other mechanisms of generating those dice. So if you like playing an army that doesn't have to roll dice, it's those damn totally not space elves. That is for you. Their detachment roll is also really strong, where they get to, every single unit, every time it activates, gets to reroll a hit and a wound dice, which effectively means that all of the elves will always, or all of the Aeldari, will always be highly reliable in the role that you are assigning them to do. Downside, because they are super fast, and they hit very, very hard, they die when you sneeze at them. This does not apply to their vehicles, their monsters, or anything else in the army that is not actually an elf. But their elf bodies are, or their not elf bodies, are very, very vulnerable. They're only T3. They typically have a 4-up armor save. It is very easy to blow through them, and they are expensive. So it's not super cheap. Now, when we're talking about the speed of this army, let me just give you an example. You have a unit called your Warp Spiders. These guys move 12, and they have fly. Their special ability allows them to move an extra 12 inches for an off chance that one of them takes a single mortal wound. And it doesn't even count as an advance, so they can still shoot their huge flamer guns that have devastating wounds with it. They are fast, people. And then you can combine that with one of the stratagems that the elves have, which will allow you to move in the shooting phase. These guys go in, oh my gosh, what is it? I think it's 36 inches in a turn without even thinking about it. It is insane how fast the elves are. So if you like fast armies, this is for you. They have very extremely strong solo, big, like, Sable Center models. So you've got the Incarn, which has a very unique mechanism to be able to teleport all over the battlefield whenever a unit dies, which is super, super cool, and it's very, very powerful. You've got the Avatar of Cain, which is this massive, like, demonic, wreathed in fire warrior who halves all damage coming into him. He's very tough, and he can cause big problems. You have the Wraith Knight, which, if you guys remember from the beginning of the Wraith Knight, was honestly the dumbest model that's ever existed in terms of raw strength. But now it is just a good, solid, strong unit that can really hurt your opponent across the battlefield. They also have an extremely strong MSU build. So I told you that in the unit previously about the Warp Spiders. Well, you can run 3 of them, and you can run 3 Infiltrator units, and you can run 3, like, Advance and Charge units. They have the ability to flexibly go big, powerful death units, or this massive MSU spam. And either way, these guys score like it's no one's business. They are one of the best scoring games in the entire army. So if you like playing a game where your game plan is just to get your points and your opponent just has to figure out how to try to catch up, the totally not elves might be for you. And the last thing, I just want to mention one unit they have, the Fire Prism, which, seriously, guys, why the heck are you not running 3 Fire Prisms if you're playing Aeldari? I don't get it. A Fire Prism is a unit that has an innate reroll, and it has the Eldar reroll, and it has a flat 6 damage gun that has 2 shots on it. That's like strength 14, AP 4. And it's got a special ability that lets all the other Fire Prisms shoot through 1 Fire Prism. So you can have 3 Fire Prisms on 3 different locations in the map, each being able to draw a line, and then all 3 Fire Prisms can shoot or draw a line of sight via one of those Fire Prisms. So you have unparalleled, masterful board control. You can also do shenanigans where, like, you put 1 tank out to blast things, and then you use your CP to move it behind cover so your opponent can't see it. So you effectively get to shoot all 3 tanks without exposing any of them. It's absolutely insane. So Aeldari, if you like playing tricksy stuff, that's for you. Let's move on. The Drukari. Now, guys, these are the evil version of the Aeldari, and they're totally not Dark Elves. So GW is extremely original here, and they're not space Dark Elves. I promise that. But realistically, one of the main themes of the way the army plays is actually going to be very, very similar to the way the Eldar plays itself. There are going to be some intimate differences. So, for example, there's going to be more of a focus on your melee units in your Drukari. They've got some really insanely efficient anti-infantry units in the army, especially in the melee. But they also have one of the most efficient shooting platforms in the game in the form of Scourge. So Scourge have the ability to blast you and then move so that they can't be shot. It's a very, very strong ability that's not tied to CP, so that you don't need to save your command points for different stratagems. By the way, just to take a quick break here, MSU stands for minimum sized unit. That's what I say when I say MSU. Just so you know. All right. They are more MSU than the Eldar. And they definitely have less single Death Star models, so you don't have like an Avatar Arcane or Wraith Knight that's really going to be a big centerpiece to the army. They're basically about maximizing the efficiency of all their smaller units to go and just mess their opponent up. And when I'm saying all of their smaller units, guys, I'm serious. We're talking 22 to 24 units in an army. When I play an army, if I can get 14 units on the table, I feel like I have a lot. So when you go all the way up to 22 to 24 units in an army, yeah, it starts to get a little redonkulous. Let's move on. We're going to talk about the Gene Stealer cults. Now, these are a actual original idea from Games Workshop, and I really, really love these guys. This is actually the very first army I ever played back in 9th. I am not good with this army. I didn't stick with them. The playstyle doesn't suit me, but it is a very cool army, and I love the rules for it. You know, we were just talking about Drukari, and we were talking about how they are the kings of MSU. Well, not exactly. The Gene Stealer cults, my friends, these guys are the kings of MSU. Effectively, what this army is you have the Tyranids, which we'll get to them later, but they infect a population, and you have the population of a normal Forge world, or basically any world in the Imperium, or even some other worlds, and they get infected by the Gene Stealer curse. So suddenly their DNA shifts just a little bit, and they start planning, and they start figuring out how are they going to uprise and take over the planet, and then present it to the Tyranid organism to devour. It is a true uprising, and it is a very twisted and dark army. One of the craziest things about the army is they don't even realize that they're evil. They think they're doing good until the Tyranid invasion fleet shows up, at which point the Tyranid invasion fleet releases control over them, and they realize, oh no, we just doomed our entire sector. And then they generally to fight to defend the planets, but the Tyranids are there to eat. So Gene Stealer cults are a really twisted army, and most people who are really good with them are also really twisted individuals. I mean you, Danny Porter. Just kidding. I love Danny. Basically, so Gene Stealer cults are freaking awesome. They have excellent detachment rules. They have a truly busted faction rule. And when I say busted in this term, for good or for worse, this busted faction rule will either just auto win matchups or it will auto lose matchups sometimes. So it can be it's just a mechanism that probably does need to be fixed, but is really, really cool in spirit. They have the most deep strike shenanigans of any army in the game, meaning they can just have units that teleport and pop up all over the place. One of their detachments has the ability to give you 6-inch or even 5-inch charges out of deep strike, which is unbelievable if you know this game. They have the ability, when they lose one of their units, you roll a dice. If it's on a 4-up or a 5-up, depending on certain circumstances, the unit just comes back to life, and you get to bring them back onto the table. So you can play games where you have over 30 units because units come back to life. Now, none of the individual units in the army tend to be that powerful, but that's okay, because you're going to get like 30 of them, and they're all going to have these synergies based off of stacking buffs and nerfs and all these things that just brings together a plan where they can just dominate the battlefield. This is the army for the people who like just using trash units and stacking buffs and nerfs. If you like strategizing and planning, this is the ambush army for you. Those are the Gene Stealer cults. Let's talk about, not the Gene Stealer cults, we're going to talk about the Leagues of Votan. Rock and stone, baby. Rock and stone. And trust me, this army is definitely not space dwarves. Totally not. It's not dwarves in space who are wearing like mining equipment or special exosuits that make them able to mine minerals off of asteroids. It's not them. They don't worship the ancestors like they totally worship the ancestors. Uh, Not space dwarves. Anyway, this army is full of elite infantry, elite vehicles. It's got a very small roster, which tends to make the army easier to learn in my experience. Doesn't necessarily make them easier to master, but does make it easier for beginners to get into it because you just don't have as many data sheets to really have to grasp. They have extremely high impact models with access to high armor saves and armor of contempt, like stratagems. Well, when I say armor of contempt like stratagems, basically that's just anything that makes you ignore a blip of AP in the game, which can make your units very, very durable. So if you see the picture here, we've got like a picture of this big monstrous vehicle here. It's called a Hecaton Land Fortress. This thing is going to be a 2-up armor save. It's going to be standing in cover, which is going to make it very annoying to ever get rid of. It shoots freaking hard. It's a transport. It's highly durable. It's a really, really awesome model. And that is just kind of indicative of how your Leagues of Votan, which are not Space Dwarves models, go. Now, they have some very, very interesting spiking mechanisms. So, for example, they've got a unique weaponry called beam weapons, which will allow them, the range is, say, 24 inches, say, on these conversion beam weapons, and they are sustained hits D3, meaning if you roll a 6 to hit, you get D3 bonus hits. However, these conversion weapons have a weird mechanism that if you're within 24 to 12 inches, so not closer than 12 inches, then you get to get sustained D3 on a 4-up instead of a 6-up, which means that they can just get crazy damage spikes out of nowhere. They also have a mechanism where they also have a stratagem which will allow them to give any unit sustained hits too. So they have the ability to just really, really let the dice spike up and just have amazing, super intricate dice rolls that just crush your opponents. Lastly, their army rule is really cool. It's called the Judgment Token Mechanism. Effectively, what this does is when an enemy unit kills one of the totally not Space Dwarves units, then they get what's called a Judgment Token, which will increase the efficiency of all the Space Dwarves into the enemy unit which had killed one of them. It's vengeance for their fallen kin. So, these are Leagues of Votan. They're totally not Space Dwarves, but they are awesome, and I highly recommend you give them a shout. Let's talk about the Necrons. These are 50 million year old robot people that are absolutely not Terminators. They might look like Terminators. They might think like Terminators. They might move like Terminators. They might repair themselves like Terminators. They are not Terminators, people. Come on, this is original IP. You have multiple different, very, very exciting detachments for your Necron armies. So, first off, the army rule, which will allow them to just regenerate wounds and models. So at the beginning of every command phase, every unit in the entire army will just regenerate D3 wounds. There's various ways to make this even more. There's various ways to make this apply to people who are in Deep Strike. But basically, if you want the unending horde of not monsters, but of robots that it's going to be advancing, when they die, they just repair themselves and pop back up and just bring despair upon your foes, you're going to freaking like the Necrons. In their individual detachments, you've got detachments that make it much easier for them to resurrect their models. You've got a detachment that allows them to teleport across the battlefield. You've got the detachments that make them extremely killy because they just get to start re-rolling all of their hit rolls based off of objective control. There's lots of very flexible ways to play this army, which is really, really fun for people who are looking for something new. So if you're getting into a new army and you're like, oh, I don't want to play an army that only has one way of playing, this might be for you. They have a huge roster of units that can be used in multiple different scenarios and multiple different situations. The Necron's pretty rock. And it is the only army in the game that allows you to use enslaved star gods on the battlefield, which is pretty dang sick, if I do say so myself. Even though Satan are nonsense and I hate them with a horrible passion, they are still pretty cool. So there you go. Now let's talk about the single coolest army in the entire game. It's the Orcs. And when I say the Orcs, I'm talking about the Orcs with a K, and they're definitely not Orcs with a C. But they are actually Space Orcs. However, they're different Space Orcs. These Orcs, which are totally not ripped off from any other fantasy or sci-fi, IP in the world. These guys are, in fact, murder mushrooms. They are actually spores that grow up into being these green, goofy love balls of death and destruction that we all adore. Which is why they're all over the place, and we can never truly get rid of them in the 41st millennium. However, they are 100% the coolest faction in 40k. You get massive hordes of these green sins, and they live only for battle and bringing us hilarious things. When you read Orc lore, you're gonna never stop laughing. until you realize that this is actually still a really dark setting, and some truly horrible things happen when these murder machines just come straight for you. But it is absolutely hilarious while you're reading the lore. Anyway, they have some randomized mechanics, which will allow that, like, all of their shooting is very random based. It's going to get D6 hits, but it's going to have very high strength. But they hit on absolute garbage, which means they have the worst shooting in the army in the game, except for sometimes when their shooting pops off, and then it's suddenly the best shooting in the game. They have a mechanism called the wah, which is one of the most fun things in existence, is to scream wah when you're going headfirst into your opponent. But effectively, your wah turn is the same thing as everyone else's go turn. It's just on steroids. When they declare the wah, everything in the entire army gets to advance and charge. Everything in the entire army gets +1 strength and attack. And everything in the entire army gets a 5-up invulnerable save for the entire battle round. So when orcs are going in, these guys are freaking going in, and they are ready to wipe you in one turn, or at least deal traumatic damage to you in one turn, so that they can hopefully score enough points to survive till the end of the battle. They've got flexible builds. They can build Death Star units, and they can build MSU based off of whether they want to be more like scoring heavy or just killing their opponents heavy. And did I mention how bad their shooting is? It's the worst shooting in the game, except for when it's not. But it's almost always the worst shooting in the game. And once again, these guys have the ability to make a huge number of units. I've made orc armies with 20 plus units, and they're freaking good. So that's the orcs. This is my favorite faction in the game, and I think you'll find that's the favorite faction of a lot of people in the game, because orcs be cool. Anyway, let's talk about the Tau. This is going to be not the most loved faction in the game. As a matter of fact, they might be the most hated faction in the game. It doesn't mean the faction is not fun. It's just really, really fun to hate on them. If you like Gundam Wing, but you hated all the cool energy swords that they had in it, this might be for you. And it's definitely, the army is certainly 100% not based on every single mech-based anime that's ever existed. I promise you it's not based off of every mech anime ever made. But these guys are 100% the definition of speed and damage. They are not the inexorable gun line that just sits and slowly advances. These guys are fast, and they shoot freaking hard. They've got extremely flexible detachments, meaning you're not going to get bored of their playstyle so long as you enjoy shooting. Like, every detachment is shooting. Like, they don't do melee. Just, they don't do melee. So, as long as you enjoy the shooting aspect, they have a very flexible way of doing the shooting. They've got a detachment that will give every unit in their army advance and shoot for 3 turns. They've got a detachment that will give every single unit in their army sustained hits 2 for 3 turns. They've got a detachment that will allow you to 3-inch deep strike, shoot, and then move after you shoot. There are so many really cool ways that you can run Tau. That I honestly, if you like shooting, man, it's an army that you should play. I will, of course, make fun of you constantly, because it's very fun to make fun of the Tau, but they are pretty sick, to be real. They also have insanely cool allies in the form of the Kroots. Now, unfortunately, the Kroots rules kind of suck, so you don't really see them very much on the tabletop, but they do have some interesting units that can be wrapped up into the army. I would like to see GW fix some of the Kroot units, or maybe the Kroot detachment, because there's also a detachment which focuses on the Kroot, but it just doesn't really work all that well. Like I said, this is the most fun army to hate, but it is also the living embodiment of the Danny DeVito meme. So anyway, I started blasting. That is the Tau. So there you go. We've got one more today, guys, and then we'll close it off. This is then the Tyranids. These are the evil psychic space bugs. And to Games Workshop's credit, they did exist before the Zerg. They existed before StarCraft came around. So, mad respect, GW. You made it. You did it. You did it. This is the army that you're going to play if you want to live out your kaiju dreams. They are extremely, extremely flexible. They've got units that can provide in any scenario you could ever imagine. They've got extremely high damage and high toughness shooting and melee monsters. You can make an army 100% out of monsters with this. And depending on the detachment you want to play, sometimes your monsters can even just walk straight through walls, which is really dang sick. Seriously, if you like monsters, this is the army for you. They can also play with horde mechanisms. So if you just want to put thousands and, well, not actually thousands, but if you want to put over 100 models on the table, that's just these little bugs that are skidding around, you can. You can do it. I'd be willing to bet you could build a Tyranids army that is 200 models. I'd be willing to bet you could do it. So they 100% have horde mechanisms in place. They also have some of the coolest centerpieces in the entire freaking game, especially when you start talking about, like, the Norn emissaries. Man, I don't have it pictured here, but right here you could just see some of the massive bugs, which are just really sick. But they have, trust me, they've got centerpieces in this army. They also have very, very annoying tech pieces that can basically annoy the piss out of any army in the game and just score points to harass. The Tyranids are unique in the way that they actually have an answer for every army in the game. There's not an army in the game that Tyranids do not have an answer for, which is fair. I mean, because it's very on brand for the army itself, which is made with the intent of devouring and adapting to be able to pressure its foes. So they can adapt to any scenario. If you want probably the most flexible army in the game, I'd be willing to bet the Tyranids are even more flexible than your Space Marines. So, guys, it's a sick-ass army, and if you have never taken a look at it, the Tyranids are worth your time. Anyway, that is every single Xenos army in the game right now. All of them are cool. All of them are very, very playable, and realistically, we need more Xenos love out there. So, give these things a whirl. If you want me to do another video where I talk about all of the Chaos armies, well, I'm probably going to do it anyway, but still request it down below because it helps the algorithm. Anyway, like, subscribe, share with your friends, and I'll be back with more videos for you. Crump on, everyone. Bye.